Good morning and welcome to the 12th in a series of ICJ Kenya's Justice and Rule of Law webinars. Our session today is jointly convened by the International Justice Mission. Thank you for finding time to join us. My name is Julie Wayua-Madheka, and my co-moderator for today is Agre Juma from the IJM. We wish to kickstart this webinar with a performance, a lively performance that is, from Javan the Poet and Anthem Republic. Over to you, Javan and Anthem. Thank you. Javan and Anthem, do you mind unmuting your microphones, please?
Are we good?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much for having us perform on this particular event. And with me is Anthem Republic, Baraka the saxophonist, and Yani. We're going to do two pieces that talk about the issues that are happening, in particularly enforced disappearances. Thank you. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got found. Days are gone when we got lost and we got when we got lost and we got found. Thank you very much. We're going to do for you the second piece. And this is dedicated to all families who've lost their loved ones. We know the pains in your heart and we stand with you and always gonna stand with you because we ask for justice for you and also that you find your loved ones. Tena na tena na tena na tena, wengi wamelost. Tena wengi wana cry. Tena na tena, wengi wana die. Juni tena na tena na tena na tena. Kazi ya gani kublow holes kwa heads na chest, si kuprotect. Ni contest ya nani anangusha wengi, nani anajaza meli, Nani atashinda hesi? The system ziko mesi. Alisema shoot to kill. What is all over kwa screen? Kama mbaya ndio tambos tunamaliza generation. Ama player lawyer uniform. Player judge uniform. Kwa wote kwa street, shiko investigate alafu kill. Familia za victims zilipie bullets, pate pay right. Ama pathology wa gavana mocha wapate clients. Wewe. Na wewe. Si enforcer. Wewe ni killer. Wewe ni killer. Tena wengi wame lost, na tena wengi wanadai, na tena wengi wanadai, na tena citizens na law no love. Land Cruisers zimegeuka husky ferry body bags, forest grounds zimejaa body parts. Si watu ni animals kwa kila squad. Pupu shoot na kutoa bullets kwa throat, alafu kwa media wanakuwa blouse. Hakuna light kwa nje ya tunnel iko block. Hakuna change kwa youth imekuwa post. Hakuna justice kwa hiya za kesi ziko post. Not with guns but with our voices to challenge your might too. Wewe si enforcer, wewe ni killer. This piece is like a black paint that paints my heart black every time I recite it. It's like a horror movie. And I'm not the main character, so it's obvious I'm approaching my brain. Brave? Brave is no longer my name. My name is extrajudicial killing candidate. And an OCS somewhere is expecting me to pass, so let me pass this message before I pass. Because I live for the moment. More are not meant for me. God's plan. Never. Afande's plan. Afande, kaunanga rada jio kitu kifyotua huwa ina mada mtu chague la. Soka spirit kakikwambia huwa kaambie la. Lazima ujue hiyo ni light unadimu kwa familia yenye shatoreshwa giza. Familia yenye na mishenge kwa mchezo wa pigiza. Juleta bremina akiamka endele kuche stream. Stream yake kumexasadi according to God's will, but blood haini real. Na ushampiuza your dream. So then unachesti baki kwa swara kando. Mama nyumbani na maombi, Mungu linda mtoto wangu na hizi swara ukiweke kando. Tumetoka kuleta hizi kando, God. Sisi sio kiatu, but please prepare our hearts. Vijana wangeitwa baba. Sayadi msichana kieka kinyozi hezi dai kuitwa baba but anawish. Anawish gani ingekuwa na mdomo ukienda kushuti kwambia Yesu was the next big thing na wish. Na wish kuona jioni, but na wish kuona next year, but here now the only wish imebaki ni kuona jioni na wish. Na wish polisi itwe mada wish ya kona license na wish. Na wish hizi wish zisifanye wanidish tulikazi kona meno cho vile zitawauma. Inashangaa vile kendo yuza kwa sababu na vile life ni ngumu kuliko chuma. Inakuweka wasiwasi hadi huwezi plastiki yako. Vile umevaa. Chuma sipakane nao tu wanaweza kuvaa. You are addressed according to how you are dressed. You are a charm of Squeeze hakuna difference ya ugonjwa na afya. Zote zinaweza kushika anytime. But mayuth wana prefer ugonjwa kuliko kugongwa na ribe in the name of wewe ni baby. Na nikiwa na sura ngumu bado wataniku. Sako makosa ni yangu, ya wazazi ama ni ya God. Afande. Na respect ya wewe ni kuijaji. Wataka kama umevaa koti wesi koti judge. Nipeleke kwa judge ni judge fuata sheria. Mimi pia nitafuata sheria. Tulietwali na respect sheria kwa sheria na tu respect. Wale wenye mtu anaweza kuwa kipiga raundi ya mwepingia police station wa hotel na endelee na raundi. Wale wenye hata haya fando kikamu nipate base. Utaniambia nikusongea tulie kidogo. Si kidogo nikikuona na kuonyesha kisongo. Alafu unani profile na uongo. Si tulie tu hali yenye mtani ukiwa na mhalifu na kusaidia kushika kumbadilisha maisha, si kumalizia maisha. Wali yenye hata ya pande unaweza nitolea kidogo kusoma kwa siku. Wali yenye mtu kitaka kukua anaua kuku ama anawasho si kwa binadamu. What's wrong ni wrong. Ataka inafanywa na your right man. Nasema wrong ni wrong. Ataka inafanywa na your right man. Sema wrong ni wrong. Ataka inafanywa na your right man. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us and thank you for listening to us. Many thanks to Anthem Republic, Barak, the saxophonist, and Yani. Thank you very much.
Javan and Anthem for that deep performance. Welcome to those of you who have just joined us. Today, our topic of discussion is criminalizing enforced disappearance and advancing accountability for torture in Kenya. This particular conversation is further amplified as it is the commemoration of Willie Kimani, Joseph Muiruri, and Josephat Mwenda. My name is Julie Wayuamadheka from the ICJ Kenya.
And my name is Agre Juma from International Justice Mission. June 23rd is a significant day to us at the International Justice Mission, the legal fraternity, civil society actors, and the whole nation, as it is the day when my colleague Willie Kimani, our client Josephat Mwenda, and taxi driver Joseph Muiruri were abducted as they left court in Mavoko. Following their abduction, they were disappeared for 1 week, during which time their whereabouts and fate were both unknown and denied. Our discussion today on enforced disappearances is inspired by this week-long disappearance of the Mavoko 3, which was followed by a chance discovery of their tortured bodies in Ol Donyo Sabuk. We would like to recognize other Kenyan families, survivors of enforced disappearances, some of whom still do not know the whereabouts or fate of their loved ones. The discussion is also timely as it falls in the same week as the International Day in support of victims of torture. It is our hope that through these discussions today, we will commence dialogue that will culminate into actionable steps towards sanctioning enforced disappearances in Kenya. This conversation is also taking place on social media under the hashtag End Enforced Disappearances and the hashtag Wako Wapi.
To engage us in this discussion is a panel of distinguished jurists and legal practitioners who bring on board immense experience and expertise on the subject matter. Allow me to briefly introduce them to you. First of all, we have Victor Kamau, the Deputy Director, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. We have Hussein Khalid, Executive Director, Haki Africa. Willie Kimani, Director of Systems Reforms at the International Justice Mission. Nelson Harvey, President of the Law Society of Kenya. Li Fang, the Senior Human Rights Advisor, Office of the UN High Commission for Human Rights. And last but certainly not least, Nudin Haji, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We wish to thank all our panelists for joining us today. And with that, I wish to ask Agri to set the scene of what it is we are here to discuss today.
To provide context, we will commence this session with two stories of families that have suffered enforced disappearances. The first is the case of Daniel Baru Nyamohanga that is summarized in a video which we will now watch.
All right, kindly bear with us as we set up the video.
That would be the first story. The second story will be the case from Mombasa of Athuman Mohammed Haji, whose brother will give an account of the disappearance that took place early in this year.
Assalamu alaikum. Mimi kwa majina naitwa Najim Muhammad, ndugu yake Athmani Muhammad ambaye alipotea siku ya tarehe 16 Januari tarehe 16 wakati ametoka msikitini anaelekea nyumbani, na ikatokezea gari ikamshika njiani, ikamvamia na kumweka kwa ndani. Gari yenyewe ni KCD 594S. Gari hiyo ilipomweka ndani ikatoweka naye, mpaka leo hatujui hatima yake na hatujampata. Na tungeomba kama utakuwa na uwezekano ama usaidizi wowote, ndugu yetu huyu tumpate, tujue yuko wapi, ili huzuni hii imalizike, kwa sababu hatuna raha mpaka sasa hivi familia, kwa sababu hatujui yuko wapi, wala yuko hai ama yuko hali gani. Na kesi hii tuliripoti police Makupa Police Station, lakini mpaka leo hatujapata habari yoyote kumhusu yeye, na OB namba ya case ilikuwa ni OB 2617/1/2020. Sasa tungeomba usaidizi wowote kwa ndugu yetu huyu, ama shirika hizi zitufanyie usaidizi kwa njia yoyote, tupate tujue hatima zao ni vipi. Na matatizo haya hayakuanza kwa ndugu yangu huyu, matatizo haya yameanzia hata kwa wengine ambao ni katika familia yangu, ambao ni wameshukuliwa Lamu. Kuna baadhi wakaachiliwa 3, mwingine ambao ni 4 anaitwa Idris Omar Bwanadi, mpaka leo naye hatumjui yuko wapi na hajaachiliwa. Ni kama ndugu yetu Athmani vile vile hatujui yuko wapi mpaka sasa hivi. Tungeomba mashirika haya, tungeomba sana kama kuna uwezekano tujue ndugu zetu hawa wako wapi, tutasaidika vipi, na tuna matumaini makubwa huenda tukapata usaidizi kutokana na haya mashirika. So tungeomba sana tupate usaidizi na tupate matumaini, tuko na matumaini kuhusu mambo kama haya, kwa vile kama vile tumetafutwa kuja kuelezea shida zetu na tumezileta, na ni matumaini yetu kwamba shida hizi huenda zikawa tumepata jibu na tukajua hatima za hawa watu wako wapi au kuachiliwa kama wameshikiliwa. Mimi ningependa kutoa shukrani zangu kwa wote na kwa walioshiriki wote, na kama kuna la zaidi pengine wataka kuniuliza jambo lolote, mimi niko tayari kujibu kulingana na mambo kama haya yalivyotokezea kuhusu ndugu zangu hawa. Asanteni sana.
Asante sana Najim, na asante sana pia kwa Haki Afrika ambao wameweza kusaidia kuwezesha mazungumzo yako siku ya leo. And so we'd like to go back to the video that we were to play. Maybe we'll first go to some questions to the DPP, who is with us and who has another meeting shortly after this. And so we'd like to take this opportunity while he's still with us to ask some of the questions that we would want to ask before we go to the video that we were to play. Thank you so much, DPP, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd start with the case of Daniel Baru, which we had shared earlier concerning the issues around it, and which we will show shortly. I know your team is with us, and if there will be any questions, they will be able to ask, they will be able to answer. The final order in the case of Daniel Baru was directed to your office to charge for murder. Appreciating that the office of the DPP is an independent office and acknowledging that these families desire justice, how do you balance the role and independence of your office while assisting these families to realize their aspirations of justice by pursuing accountability for enforced disappearances?
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a very very emotional subject to deal with, but I will try my best to answer the questions put across to me. As you all know, Daniel Baru disappeared around the 17th of January 2017, or was arrested around that time and disappeared from police custody. And the directions that we were given by the judiciary is that ODPP sought to, or within its independence, seeks to prosecute or direct investigations on the matter. Of course, as you all know, Article 25 of the Constitution envisages that habeas corpus is a writ that cannot be limited, and that it is also captured under Section 389 of the Criminal Procedure Code of 2000, the amended Criminal Procedure Code of 2009. And as ODPP, we have tried our best to follow up on this case with the help of IJM and other institutions. We've tried to work with IPOA also. It has not been easy to identify the particular inspector or the OCS who was involved, who apparently retired and is not within Kenya, apparently. So we're still trying to work on that. Of course, the independence of the ODPP in ensuring that the orders given by court are adhered to depends on the evidence that is tabled before us as ODPP. The burden of proof on an application of habeas corpus still remains on the petitioner. And on this particular case, there was enough evidence that the individual was in police custody. But for example, in the case of Mohammed, who's just spoken here, it is very difficult when an individual is not booked into police, in a police station and in the OB, for a particular person to be able to prove that an individual was in police custody. It is also very difficult when you don't have the investigators or the police agreeing to cooperate with the investigators and also the prosecutors. So it is quite a tall order when the burden of proof is on the petitioner, and eventually later on when you have to rely, for us as ODPP, we have to rely on investigators to ensure that we have the evidence to prosecute those who were involved in enforced disappearances. As a country, under Article 2 of the Constitution, we are bound by international conventions. I think we are a party, and we've signed the Rome Statute under the I'm trying to remember the act, but under the International Crimes Act of 2008, we have defined. I mean, there's it talks about a person who in Kenya or elsewhere commits a crime against humanity. And if you look at the definition of crimes against humanity, it does include enforced disappearances. So we are bound to investigate and also prosecute once the evidence is stable. And as ODPP, you asked the question of how do we assist these families? We are bound within our mandate to assist and actually prosecute where there is evidence on behalf of the Republic, and of course, by extension, of the victims and the complainants in situations where enforced disappearances has occurred. As I said, this is a very emotional subject. As ODPP and myself as DPP, I do not condone such actions, and I believe the government also does not condone such actions, but this happens. And the onus then, once the habeas corpus, once that burden of proof has been proven, the onus is on the government then to show that if there is any detention, it is lawful and it is constitutional. And if it is not, then action has and must be taken. Of course, again, I repeat, as ODPP, we depend on the file and the evidence that is tabled for us to be able to prosecute. And we cannot prosecute if we don't have that. I hope I've tried my best to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. DPP, for that insight into the challenges that go into even the prosecution of those cases. And you have actually mentioned something of great importance, which is the international instruments. So I want to pose a question to you, which is, drawing from your experience as a lawyer and your interaction with investigations and prosecutions at different levels, what are the areas you see the need for intervention, be it policy, process, or legislative, or even behavior change, to be addressed to handle enforced disappearances and instances of torture?
Thank you. I think out of experience, first of all, I'll talk about behavior change. Out of experience, the public doesn't seem to have a lot of trust in government institutions. And a lot of time when you have the disappearances, you have either nobody coming up as a witness other than the complainant, and it becomes a tall order for investigations to proceed successfully. And what I would urge the public is to be, take the leap of faith and be more bold in terms of giving the evidence. Of course, the onus is also on the government and us to ensure that we provide conducive atmospheres, to ensure that, and build that trust. As ODPP, we are trying our best to build the trust between us and the public, so that such information and evidence is more forthcoming. Of course, civil society is very important, and it is key. A lot of individuals involved in this seem to have more trust with the civil society, whom we have also reached out to allow us to be able to work and serve the public more efficiently. And if you look at, for example, Willie Kimani, a lot of evidence and a lot of help came from IJM. And I think without the role of IJM in this, we would not have gotten to where we are today in court, for example. And many other cases where we've worked with Haki Africa and other civil society. So there is that issue of, if the public doesn't trust the government agencies, then they should be able to trust the civil organizations, the civil society, and give more information. On the other hand, I think there is a lot more that can be done, especially with police, because a lot of enforced disappearances are attributed to the police. Proper recording at the police stations, that is very important. Of course, the policy has to be also changed at both the police and the other agencies to be more responsive to cases of enforced disappearances. There has been a lot of allegations that investigating agencies are not very responsive, but we are trying to work on that, and we are trying to work as much as possible with both IPOA and the Kenya, the government human rights organization, to ensure that a more proactive policy by government is formulated to build more user-friendly environments for individuals who want to complain and who have issues with enforced disappearances. We have tried to enhance, for example, witness protection. We are also working with witness protection, but we are trying to ensure that witness protection is well funded and well facilitated to allow for those who are afraid, for example, to give evidence, or who think that they might be harmed, then they can be brought under witness protection. But that also requires more responsive policies to be formulated, and also adequate fundings. Of course, more cooperation between us and the civil society. Since I took office, I've tried to do that, and we will keep on trying to enhance our coordination and collaboration. And lastly, and I think everybody here will agree with that, is of course police reforms. There is need for more police reforms, but this needs to be worked out with all the criminal justice players, whether it is the civil society, the Law Society of Kenya, the ODPP as a distinct institution, the Human Rights Institution, and IPOA, and others within the criminal justice system, so that we can have the desired reforms that have not yet been achieved. I hope I've been able to address the question adequately. Thank you.
You have. Thank you very much. We understand that we are strapped for time because you have to check into another meeting, but we have one question specifically directed to you in the comments section. It's from Mr. Charles Gidhui, who asks, when does the DPP invoke its powers to conduct prosecution-led investigations?
I don't think there is any you can't say that there is any, the thing is that there are no guidelines. And what we've done is we've come up with the decision to charge guideline. And under the decision to charge guideline, we have tried to enumerate when a prosecution-led investigation can occur. There is, as I said, there's a lot of reform that will be required to ensure that it is properly anchored. There is, I must admit, there's a lot of resistance when that happens. But even when a file comes to us, before we make a decision, if there are areas to cover, we try and give directions to the investigators which areas they need to go and investigate. So that, in essence, can be equated to prosecution-led investigations, because then you ask them specifically to go and deal with certain areas. We have been careful with that because that aspect is captured under the Act, but is not very clear in the Constitution. Perhaps with the current reviews under the BBI, some of you can suggest for that if you think it will play a more, it will add more value into investigations. So the kind of prosecution-led investigations that we've been involved in is once a file comes in and you ask the different investigative bodies to cover areas that would actually force them to go down to the ground and do the investigations as directed by the ODPP. Thank you.
We would like to release you. We understand that some of your team members will stay with us.
Yes,
and
my
will
deputy
be to answer questions.
Yes, my deputy, Madam Dorcas Odur, will be here for you. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and welcome to Madam Dorcas Odur. At this time, we'd like to go back to the video that we were to play earlier on the case of Daniel Baru Nyamohanga before we proceed with the panel discussion.
Engage us on social media through our various platforms at IJM Kenya, at ICJ Kenya. You can also reach out to the various panelists and their institutions through their social media platforms. You can also bring in your question in the question and answer session. And during the question and answer session, during the plenary session, we will have an opportunity for you to voice your question to the respective panelists. You can do so by raising your hand, and the team and the technical team will get in touch with you in regards to how you can voice your question during the plenary session. I do believe that now we can switch to the plenary discussion as planned.
I just needed to confirm on the video.
All right.
Okay, seems the video is ready.
Ni bora vile Mungu alisema kifo kitakuja kuwatenganisha kati ya wawili. Mimi sikupenda mwanadamu atutenganishe mimi na mzee wangu, ila kifo. Hata alikuwa anaomba Rebeka, utakuja kunizika mke wangu na mimi nitakuja kukuzika. Mzee alikamata tarehe 12 mwezi wa kwanza 2017. Ilipofika saa 5, yule ambaye anakaa karibu na charge, inaelekea saa 6, yule ambaye anakaa karibu na charge akaamka akasema, wale watu wote mlikuja kuona watu wenyu ambao walikamata tarehe 12, tunaomba muondoke kotini, watu wenu hawana hatia ya kustakiwa ama ya kuingia mahakamani, kwamba wanastakiwa. Tukaamka watu wote, kuamka tu kwenye koti pale, kuingia hivi tuna close hivi tuingie kwenye gate la koti, tena na wao tukakutana na wao tena wanateremshwa na gari ya polisi. Walikuwa hivyo watu 6 hivyo, mzee wangu alikuwemo. Kufika pale station, maana tukasikia nipe vitu yangu, nipe vitu yangu, nipe vitu yangu. Yaani tulisikia tu pale sauti, nipe vitu yangu, nipe vitu yangu. Tukasikia wamesukuma wote, hakuna makelele. Tukauliza, jamani, mbona mlisema mnaenda tulisema tuliambiwa kote tunaenda kupatia watu wetu, tena mmewarudisha ndani kwa nini? Ofisa akasema nendeni mpaka kesho, muje kesho.
Nikaenda nikatafuta yeye, nikamwona siku ya mahakama Kiranja kwa siku moja. Tangia hapo sijaonekana.
Aliniachia nikiwa na watoto 3. Wasichana 2, kijana mmoja. Alinipenda, alinijali kama bibi yake na alipenda watoto wake. Ni mtu ambaye alikuwa anapenda sana kukaa karibu na watoto wake. Na kile chote mtoto alikuwa anahitaji, alikuwa anampatia. Mpaka sasa hivi haja atoke. Watoto wamehangaika huku na kule. Wakiniuliza, mama, baba yuko wapi? Mbona hatujaimuona baba na ulituambia anaenda kutafuta mali na sijaimuona? Nikawaambia watoto, baba yenu alikamata. Mpaka sasa hivi wanakwani huko kukamata baba, mbona wengine wanakamata wanarudi? Kwa nini baba yetu hajarudi?
Ako na watoto, ako na mke. Sasa hivi kana mtoto wake hawa wataenda shule namna gani? Nani atawasomesha? Na mimi kuna nguvu. Mimi nakushukuru mzee.
Ewe Mungu wajua njia zangu yatengeze, yale siwezi yasongeze, wewe ndiye nguvu ya wanyonge. Ewe Mungu wajua njia zangu yatengeze, yale siwezi yasongeze, wewe ndiye nguvu ya wanyonge. Nalilia yatima wajane kama hana maspouse, damu crime for justice itaran kama maji kwa fereji state house.
So this is a habeas corpus by his family, represented by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, in discharge of its mandate to protect the fundamental right to life and liberty enshrined in Chapter 4, the Bill of Rights.
Chief Inspector Kimsaina Serem is hereby found to be in contempt of the court of this, or the contempt of the orders of this court, by failing and or refusing to produce the person of Daniel Barunyamuhanga or his body thereof before any court of law. B, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions shall forthwith charge Chief Inspector Kimsaina Serem with the murder of Daniel Barunyamuhanga. C, the Office of Director of Public Prosecution investigate and bring to book all other officers culpable towards the death of Daniel Barunyamuhanga. These are the orders of this court.
For a family that has waited for more than nearly 1.5 years to know where their loved one is and still does not know where their loved one is something that's very, very important. It's a momentous decision because the law is there to protect people and there should be no people who live outside the protection of the law.
mama, pole, pole 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 mama, pole.
Thank you. This video is available on the Missing Voices YouTube account in case you need to review it. I'd like to direct this next question to Victor Kamau, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and who was involved heavily in representation, in legal representation, in the case that we have just seen of Daniel Baru Nyamohanga. Wakili Victor.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. In 2017, the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights offered legal representation in the case of Daniel Baru Nyamohanga. While it is rare to succeed in getting a writ of habeas corpus, this was achieved in this case. What made this possible in your assessment, and what are some of the challenges that you experienced in conducting this habeas corpus case and others that you know about?
Thank you. Firstly, I think this was a very clear-cut case. The arrest and incarceration of Baru was very well documented. And as we went to court, we went knowing that there was a good link between his being in custody at Kehancha police station and his being disappeared. Therefore, that was one reason why the habeas was successful. I think also a good reason why it was successful is some of the evidence included a very, very clear forgery of the OB to show that he had been released on the 17th of January at 11 o'clock, and yet his wife said that she had seen him at 4 o'clock, at 4 p.m. on that same day in the cells. And the police tried to squeeze in some entry at 11 o'clock, which the court saw right through and actually observed in its judgment that that was fraudulent. So I think that that was one specific case where it was much, much, much easier to prove habeas corpus. In many, many cases that we've done as a commission, starting in 2007, we found that the big problem was that there was no record of the incarceration, abduction, or disappearance of any of the people that petitioned for habeas corpus. And the courts, of course, were very cautious and just said, unfortunately, we couldn't prove. We are doing one in Garissa right now, where the witness is actually the sister of the disappeared. And the thing that will probably make it doable is that she saw the victim very heavily tortured under police arrest. So I think it just really depends on the nexus between the incarceration and the disappearance. Now, some of the challenges, I have to say that one challenge we faced was that even after we applied for habeas corpus and served the AG and the Inspector General of Police, they did not enter appearance in court. they just weren't interested at all. And after some time, the court just suggested, well, why don't you just invite the office of the DPP and thank that office very much, because they actually, in the end, put a presence in for the state. But that was one challenge. And the other challenge was that we found the process of the court very interminable. And I guess the court was also laboring under the challenges that we were also laboring under, because the matter proceeded like an ordinary constitutional petition. And you know, a habeas corpus is a habeas corpus. It's a very urgent application, because of course, if there is an exhumation to be done, it has to be done before what Shakespeare calls in Hamlet, that convocation of politic worms has eaten the deceased too much. So we experienced that challenge. Another challenge was also that
Mr. Victor Kamau's internet. As we wait for the technical team to resolve the issue, we can quickly move to Haki Africa. If you are with us, Halid. Are you with us? Yes, I can see you there. All right. Haki Africa has documented many cases of enforced disappearance over the years. There are those who support enforced disappearance as a justification for policing high crime areas. Briefly share your experience on the prevalent trends and challenges encountered in monitoring, documenting, and pursuing accountability for enforced disappearances during this period.
Thank you very much. And let me begin by appreciating what ICJ and IGM are doing in bringing this issue to the fore. It's something that has really affected many families, you know, from the coast of Kenya, from northeastern and different parts of our country and the globe in general. And yes, when you know, as an organization, Haki Africa has over the years been documenting enforced disappearances.
Is the volume?
Yeah, so far, yes.
Sorry, your volume is a bit low. Is it possible for you to increase the volume on your side?
Yeah, sure. Let me try to do that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's much better.
Yes. So I was explaining that so far this year, we've documented about 18 cases from the 6 counties of Coast. Last year, we had about 32 cases that we documented, and of course, shared with the authorities on enforced disappearances. And the challenges are, you know, quite a number. To begin with, it's, you know, expectations of the family. We had Najim speaking at the beginning of this webinar. Najim is an individual whom we've worked with for, you know, since the disappearance occurred. And this is a disappearance that was captured on CCTV. And this information again was shared with the authorities. We also used our social media platforms to again screen what actually happened and ask members of the public to share any information. So the first challenge that people, in organizations like Haki Africa get is the expectations of the family. Of course, when they report to you, they expect something to be done. They usually come with lots of hopes that probably their loved ones will be found. And for me, that is the greatest challenge, because particularly cases of enforced disappearances, they are very difficult to handle, you know, because one, it's difficult to prove that actually it was the police. In the case of Athman, which Najim very well expounded, we know and believe that this is the work of security agencies. We know that Athman was held in a place where 3 others were later released, and those who were released confirmed that they actually met with Athman in this mansion of some sort. From our calculations, it was in in Malindi area. But, there's very little you can do, because as human rights organizations, you don't have investigative powers. The best you can do is push the authorities to actually do something. So the challenge of having to go back to the families, telling them that, we've done the best we can. We've actually reported this to the police, we've reported to IPOA, we've reported to the DPP, and then now you have to tell them that we just have to sit and wait. It becomes very challenging. We've also experienced the challenge of using courts. In many cases that we've gone to court with, we've found that the courts are actually not in a position to assist. Of course, the burden of proof in a habeas corpus case lies on the petitioner. The best you can do is actually present videos, but then most of these people who actually pick individuals, in most cases, are dressed in civilian clothing. They do introduce themselves as police. They're usually very armed, but then, beyond that, it becomes difficult. There is one case of Hamed, who was picked at Masjid Musa, where the police were, we had videos and pictures. The guy was handcuffed, he was put in a police vehicle, and we went to court with that. We tried as much as we can, but at the end, the judge only, in his ruling, ordered for a public inquiry. So again, it's challenging because yes, you want the courts to act, you want decisions like the one my brother Victor has talked about, but then you can actually see the challenge. So that's the second great challenge, that is using courts to actually litigate enforced disappearances and habeas corpus cases. The third challenge that we experience is actually of the public. In many communities, the public believe that those who are forcefully disappeared are individuals who have issues to do with crime, particularly violent extremism, but then also common crime. And when this happens, you actually find members of the public supporting some of these incidences. So you find that the police and the security agencies continue to do what they do, believing that the public is standing with them. But we all know, as lawyers, as human rights practitioners, that due process must be followed. And when due process is not followed, then we must hold those responsible accountable for their excesses. So that is a big challenge, in that the public itself does not understand the challenges of law, does not understand that these are issues of human rights that we must stand by. And then it actually emboldens the security agencies to continue doing what they're doing. So for me, these are great challenges. And last but not least is the security of human rights defenders. We know in various times or places in time, we have had these challenges where we've had to even relocate our offices, even have to take some of our staff to hiding places because of the security risk that they were put through because of enforced disappearance cases. Presently, we are following up, like I said, 18 cases alone this year. Some of them very serious and very high-powered individuals are involved in these cases. Some of them even sitting governors presently holding office. So these are serious challenges that human rights defenders are then exposed to, and it's a big challenge to ensure that security is guaranteed.
For your contribution. I mean, what you have said holds dear, because these are issues of human rights and we cannot take the law into our hands, and there is no justification for that. Over to you, Agri.
Thank you. I'd like to direct the next question to Madam Lee Fang from the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights here in Kenya. As an international partner in the human rights space, are we doing enough to ensure that violations such as enforced disappearances are addressed? And what lessons can Kenya take from other jurisdictions that have addressed similar challenges with enforced disappearances?
Thank you. And it's good to be here with you all today. I think it's very clear that to address enforced disappearances, it's important first to recognize that this is an issue and to criminalize it, and then to take action to prevent and end impunity for disappearances. I think that there's steps that Kenya has started but has not completed. For example, Kenya signed in February 2007 the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances. And this convention is a really important treaty that sets out a range of actions that states are to take. Yet Kenya has not yet ratified it, and I think that this would be an important step. The convention does require states parties to criminalize enforced disappearances under national law, which is not yet the case in Kenya. If it was ratified, the convention would apply directly under Kenyan law institutions, so that would assist. The convention also requires effective investigations to hold perpetrators criminally responsible. And I think very importantly, it addresses some of the issues that have been raised today, such as the protection of victims, witnesses, relatives, and lawyers who are seeking accountability, the right to know the truth, and also the right to reparation. And there's been a number of questions in the chat box about compensation and relief. And the convention does provide for reparations that can look at rehabilitation, which can look at compensation, and look at guarantees and non-repetition. So I do think that ratification and implementation would be an important step for Kenya. I think another important point to make is that enforced disappearances often lead to extrajudicial executions, as sadly demonstrated by the killings of Willie, Josephat, and Joseph. And so action must equally be taken to strengthen the investigation and prosecution of extrajudicial killings, because accountability for violations is a key step in preventing their occurrence. In terms of lessons which can be drawn from other jurisdictions, globally, Latin America has been the region that has had the highest numbers of enforced disappearances, which have been linked to past and present armed conflicts, armed violence, and also migration. It's estimated that some 200,000 people have disappeared in the region in the past 2 decades. But there are some countries in Latin America that have actually taken some steps and made progress in addressing enforced disappearances. And I think that a couple of these steps to highlight is that there's a number of countries, including Argentina, Peru, and Chile, which have all struggled to deal with the legacy of enforced disappearances. They not only ratified the Convention on Enforced Disappearances, but they also recognized the competence of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances to receive and consider individual complaints from either victims or on behalf of individuals who have claimed to be victims of violations of the Convention. So this provides an external mechanism when redress is not forthcoming from within the state. I think that there's only one country in Africa so far that has done the same, which is Mali. I think another important example is legislation that has been enacted in Mexico and Peru. They've enacted laws on enforced disappearances and on missing persons, and they've set up databases to assist in the search for missing persons. So I think these are concrete steps that could be taken, and they can be taken as examples. Thank you.
Thank you for that well-informed response.
All right. Thank you, Madam Lee Fang. Now we switch over to IJM, to Ms. Willie Kimani. IJM sits in a very unique position in this discourse. As a justice institution, you have represented people whose loved ones have disappeared. Particularly, IJM is on record as an observer in the Dan Barrow case that we have just discussed. However, in 2016, it hit closer to home when Willie Kimani, his client Josephat Mwenda, and the taxi driver Josephat Muiruri were disappeared and found killed. From a personal experience and your assessment of the cases that you have been involved in as well, what is it as an outsider the nation duty bearers don't realize or don't appreciate that sees them not prioritizing these particular cases?
Thank you, Julie. And thank you to the other panelists. I think I'll pick up from where Lee ended. One of the things that perhaps most people don't realize with these particular cases is tied to what the Convention on the Protection of People Against Enforced Disappearances defines as enforced disappearances. So this is instances where there's an arrest, there's detention, or there's an abduction, ultimately a situation of deprivation of liberty of a person. And this person just, to the rest of us, they just disappear. 1 minute they're there, the next minute they're not there. And then following this deprivation of liberty is a refusal by state agents to acknowledge that this person has disappeared, or to even make efforts towards explaining what the fate of this particular person is. And so what happens with that is actually what the convention defines at the end. You keep this person outside the protection of the law, that it is impossible for this person to be protected, and it becomes then an ongoing violation. And let me explain what we mean when we say an ongoing violation. So you have someone who is missing. You don't know what has happened to them. Are they alive? Are they dead? Are they within jurisdiction? Are they not within jurisdiction? Then you also have loved ones and family who, as Khalid was saying, struggle with hope. You know, it's never lost on me that about 6 days into searching for our colleagues, we had a conversation as a team for what does life look like if we continue to search for another week, for another month, for another year. And in each one of these cases, you know, Dan Baru, Mohammed, the instances that Hussein is talking about, there are families that still have not finished, come to the end. And so it becomes an ongoing violation. Someone is unable to define whether they are a widow, whether they're a hopeful wife who is awaiting or continuing to sustain hope to find their husband. And even, you know, watching the video of Dan Baru and listening to us outside court with Victor, that was in 2018. You have to recognize we were celebrating a successful verdict from court, that a writ of habeas corpus had been issued, and the court had even bravely gone ahead and said that we would want the DPP to charge this person with murder. The specific words of the court were, because he's been unable to produce this person in court, we can only conclude that he knows this person died, and this person died within the station, and so he's responsible. And so the person should be charged with murder. Dan Baru's wife is present in court, hearing the court declare that there should be a charge of murder. But that is still not an explanation to the fate of her husband. As she said then and has repeated severally, she still has not seen her husband. She has not buried her husband. And so we have a successful court process that has still not explained away the fate of the person who remains missing. And there is still no accountability, meaning that we have a lag between what this person has experienced, what we have attempted to resolve through the law, and then what the reality is, that there is no accountability, there's no justice. And the other thing I think that should not be lost on us is and this also came up in the habeas corpus that the Law Society filed when Willie, Joseph, and Josephat were missing, that the court talked about the complexity of the investigation and certain words that Justice Kimani used in his ruling, that it was tragic, that you're starting at the nature of investigation that is being undertaken at this point is first a family saying that their loved one has been disappeared, but you're coming to the state and the state is saying, no, your loved one is missing. And so you're starting at the start, you're getting late at the start line because no one is in agreement on what it is that has happened. And even as the investigation is ongoing, you're searching for a loved one, but you're also very cognizant that you need to figure out who did it, who is behind it, which agents of state were either participating in it, committed it, or acquiesced to this particular disappearance of a person. That whole transaction and the delay to actually deliver an investigation that is prompt, that is effective, that delivers also what Lee was talking about, truth to the families, that you can say to the family, this is what has happened. That sustained by the refusal of the state to acknowledge that someone has been disappeared. And I think Justice Kimaru, in his ruling, also talked about it. He said it was impossible to understand why, despite an eyewitness saying that these people were at the camp, the higher police hierarchy decided to continue to refuse that these people had disappeared or had at any point been detained within that camp. And so this whole transaction keeps these people completely outside the protection of the law. No law covers them in a manner that would respond to what they're experiencing, would deliver a punishment that is commensurate to the nature of violence, but also would deliver accountability, that they would be able to have finality in saying, this is what happened to our loved ones, and this is the resolution of that particular incident. So it becomes a continuous cycle for these families over a period of time, a cycle that is, to use the words of the DPP, an emotional one, but it is also an ongoing one without any legal criminal justice system structures that would support them towards its resolution.
Thank you, Amaida. Thank you so much. We will now, before we actually move to the Law Society of Kenya, I think it is important for us to remember, and I think you've brought it out aptly, that these are people who have families, loved ones, colleagues, workmates, who never get closure. And that is something that we always need to remember, that they're not statistics, they're not numbers, they're people, their names, their families. And we need to always keep that at the back burner, because it is what drives us, and it's what ideally we are here to ensure that we get justice for. So I will now turn to Agri, who will direct the next.
Before I go to the president of the Law Society, I'm informed that our senior Mr. Victor Kamau is back. He had a small hitch with connection. So I'd just like to give him this opportunity so that he can finish his statement that he was making earlier.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to say that one thing that happened was that the family was clearly traumatized, because the same person who was being accused of perpetrating the disappearance was confidently running the station. Nothing had been done to even maybe take him away from the scene for a while. And you can imagine the family coming and they see him in court all the time, walking confidently in a GK and coming back, going back to the station. I think that was one serious trauma to the family. And they even at one point considered giving up the quest for the habeas corpus. I got the sense, I'm very sorry to have to say this, but I believe it sincerely. I got the sense that the police thought it's okay to kill a criminal, and they were not discouraged by their above. And I think that one problem we have is that there is general support from the upper echelons of the police of extrajudicial killings, which is very worrying, because then they will really never stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor, for that very powerful conclusion to your statement. I'm sure it will inform a lot of the next steps that we take in pursuing justice for victims. I'd like now to welcome the president of the Law Society of Kenya. He had not joined by the time we were starting. If he's with us, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. This next question is to you. The Law Society of Kenya has had a long history of tracing steps of the disappeared. In 2016 particularly, the Law Society was at the forefront of the habeas corpus case of Willie Kimani, Joseph Muiruri and Josephat Mwenda. How can the Law Society continue to be at the forefront of ensuring enforced disappearances are addressed through preventive mechanisms, for instance, law reform, in addition to responding to specific cases?
Thank you. May I take this opportunity to apologize for my late entry into the discussion. Today marks 4 years since the disappearance and eventual discovery of the bodies of our colleague Willie Kimani, together with his clients. Therefore, took the opportunity to invite the family as well as the legal team of the Law Society that was behind the effort to trace.
We can't hear you so clearly. Is there a way the volume can be raised? Or if you could move closer to the camera. To the microphone, sorry.
Okay, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Let me start from where we may have been left on account of court frustration. Today marks 4 years since the disappearance and eventual discovery of the bodies of our colleague Willie Kimani, his client, and his taxi driver. We took the opportunity as the Law Society of Kenya to call the widow of the late Willie Kimani, Hannah Kimani, as well as our legal team.
And unfortunately, we seem to be losing you still. I think if you could have the mic much closer to the president.
Sorry, let's just adjust this. Okay, are we loud enough? Are we loud enough now? Okay.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Now, we took the opportunity of inviting the widow of the late Willie Kimani, Hannah Kimani, and the legal team that was behind the habeas corpus. May I once more say that the call we made 4 years ago, I am Willie, is still more relevant today as it was 4 years ago. Reason being, cases of forced disappearances, which often result in what we have come to see as extrajudicial killings sanctioned by the state, continue. What can we do to ensure that this does not happen? Or what more can we do to ensure that we have adequate control of cases of this kind? The speakers who have spoken before me have enumerated key areas. I think first and foremost is to ensure that there is completion of any prosecutorial process that is undertaken against culprits. And in this particular case, we want to call upon the Director of Public Prosecutions, who has been very helpful insofar as the case of Willie Kimani is concerned. We also want to call upon the judiciary to ensure that there is a speedy conclusion of this trial, so that the perpetrators of this crime are brought to book. This may be one of the cases where the Law Society may want to ask the President of the Republic of Kenya, whoever will be in office then, in the event that these perpetrators are convicted, to order the execution. Because as we speak, the death sentence is still in our books. What about cases where directions have been made for the arrest and prosecution of perpetrators of this crime? I've been to the police station in Kehancha, and I've seen what happens there. It is high time that the Director of Public Prosecution complied with the order that was made by Justice Murima and brought to book not only Chief Inspector Sarem, but anybody who was in the vicinity of that police station within the hours that Daniel is indicated to have been forcibly made to disappear, and in the decision of the court, who have been killed. Now, there are other areas that need also to be addressed. Perhaps it may be an issue of reform. It may be also an issue of implementation. Insofar as reform is concerned, it is high time we got rid of these two terminologies: plain clothes policemen and unmarked cars. If a policeman is a policeman, let him be a policeman. Let the policeman be in uniform. Let the policeman be identified with his name, rank, and number. And let the policeman always move in a car that is identifiable as a car associated with the police. Because all these cases that we have discussed in today's debate relate to cases where the perpetrators of the disappearance eventually, for those cases where they've been brought to book, the killers are policemen. What has happened in developed countries? Let's look at the case of the United States of America. Save for the forces that are engaged in the accumulation of information, the Secret Service, the FBI, other forces must be identified as forces so that we have the clarity whether we are dealing with a policeman or we are dealing with somebody who is likely to be a criminal, passing himself out as a policeman. There may also be need for us to have body cameras for policemen, because often these incidences are perpetrated within the confine of a police station or in the course of performance of, so to speak, the duties of a policeman. Kenya, as we speak, appears to have put in place a very elaborate surveillance mechanism. If the police want to track you, they will track you within 3 seconds. Why is it that the central command of the police, those who hold the highest responsibility for the acts and omissions of policemen, cannot deploy these systems to bring to book, to ensure to the prosecution of those in their midst? And it should not be something new, because the National Police Service must understand that it's there to serve the public. And I'll give you a comparison. If you look at us as advocates, we'll take disciplinary measures when one of us is suspected to have committed a case that amounts to misconduct. The police must realize that they are there to serve the Kenyan public. And cases of enforced disappearances, which eventually result in extrajudicial killings, are those that must be investigated. And towards this end, I think also there is a role that must be played more effectively by IPOA. IPOA has not performed its role effectively. And we look at the prevailing environment, what has happened during the intervening period when measures had been put in place to combat COVID, restrictions of movement, curfews. How have the police behaved? I'm sure there are many people who have been forcefully made to disappear within this period. What has IPOA done? What can we do as the Law Society of Kenya? It is imperative as the Law Society of Kenya that we move this step forward. We ensure that we have in place legislation sufficient and strong enough to protect the people of Kenya from forced disappearances and extrajudicial killings. There is also a role that must be played by the judiciary effectively. On the 16th of April, 2020, a decision was made by the High Court of Kenya in which it was recognized that the police had used unreasonable force in the enforcement of the curfew order. However, despite sufficient evidence before the court of about 5 people who had been killed by the police, and in a manner to suggest that there was no need for the use of unreasonable force, the court did not go the extra mile as requested to hold the Inspector General of Police personally liable for the death of those 5 Kenyans, and also for the damage to property, and also for the harm to many people who were documented before the court as having suffered injuries, some of them aggravated injuries. And the doctrine of superior responsibility, if I may use it in the most simplistic term, is one that is recognized in many regimes. And the only way in which we can progress insofar as this issue is concerned is to have the courts embrace this doctrine. And let me go back to the case of Inspector Sarem. Why is it that the high command of the police has not been held accountable in view of the directions that were made by Justice Murima, that Inspector Sarem must be charged for the murder of Daniel? And it must be an effort by everybody, both state and non-state actors, to ensure that the issue of implementation and reform is taken into effectively. Otherwise, we will be pulling at different directions, because as the Law Society, we depend substantially on the offices of the Director of Public Prosecution to ensure to the prosecution of those who have been identified as culprits. We also depend substantially on the offices of the Director of Criminal Investigations, as well as the offices of the Inspector General of Police and IPOA. And I believe if this can be done in a united effort, we'll be able to make progress to combat and eradicate cases of enforced disappearances.
Thank you, learned senior and President, Law Society, Nelson Harvey. And thank you to all the council members who have come together with you today in making that statement, as well as the advocates who've been involved in the case of Willie, Joseph, and Josephat for the good work that you continue to do. And we hope that even in this work to ensure justice for enforced disappearances, we will be able to work together to achieve progress in this country. We are now getting into the session of plenary. And just to let you know, we have with us also Giuliani, who is an artist that has been involved in this journey a lot. And at the end of this webinar, he will be performing a number that is very familiar to those who followed the commemoration of Willie, Joseph, and Josephat in the last 4 years. I'd like to invite now Julie to ask the first question.
Thank you very much, Agri. Thank you very much to our panelists for the great insights. The questions are directed at the chat section, so some of you can go onto the chat section and respond to them after the close of the webinar, because unfortunately we will not have enough time to address all of them. But top on our mind is Madam Margaret Owande has asked, has the human rights agencies protected people giving information? This question is directed to Haki Africa. Has human rights organizations given the requisite protection to witnesses who have information?
Yes, thank you very much, Margaret. And that's a very, very important question, particularly in addressing enforced disappearances, because witnesses are key in this matter. As human rights agencies, we have actually done that, but we must also remember that there's an agency that has that mandate, the Witness Protection Agency. So we've had instances where we've worked with the witness protection agencies to ensure witnesses are safe, but in a few cases, we've actually done that ourselves. I know also the National Coalition for Human Rights Defenders, the Defenders Coalition, has also addressed the issue of witnesses. Myself, for example, I've been a beneficiary of witness protection. So yes, indeed, we've done that, and we would like to encourage witnesses to continue coming forward. And we assure you that through the witness protection agencies and mechanisms by civil society, that you will be protected, and we have to prosecute these people who are responsible for the disappearances.
Indeed, to add to that, I know IJM, ICJ Kenya, the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, we are more than willing to support in the protection of witnesses who have information appertaining to a specific human rights violation. Now to the next question.
Thank you. The next question is directed to Madam Li Fang from the UN Office of the Human Rights High Commissioner. And the question is, when can UN agencies come down to local communities when such violations occur?
Thanks. I mean, people are very welcome to reach out to us, and maybe if for the person who asked the question, maybe if you can give your contact details to the organizers so that we can follow up. Just also to note that we're working very closely with all the organizations that are part of this panel today, with ICJ, IJM, Haki Africa, with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, with the Defenders Coalition, also working with human rights defenders in communities. So we're also supporting the work that that Kenyan human rights activists and organizations are doing. But our doors are open, and we're very happy to hear from people. Thank you.
is to the president of the Law Society of Kenya, Mr. Nelson Harvey, is from Sheila Leona. She asks, should the families who have had their loved one lost receive compensation where disappeared persons are the breadwinners?
Well, it is a difficult question, but one for which I think we may look upon history for an answer. And unfortunately, money has been, for a long period of time, been identified as the only mode of compensating any loss of whatever kind. It is therefore our view that yes, money should be received as compensation, but much more must be done, because well, money may enable you to take the children of the deceased to school. It may enable you pay rent. It may enable you pay your bills, but it will never bring back one who has been forcefully disappeared and who the court, as a result of the long duration of the disappearance, has concluded that is for all practical purposes dead. Way forward, I think over and above money, strong pronouncements must be made by the court, as I've indicated much earlier, so that we have a determination, for instance, that holds the Inspector General of Police culpable, that holds the OCS or the OSPD in charge of a particular station, that holds the commander of a particular battalion responsible. Let's look at the case of Willie Kimani, for instance. I highly doubt that a murder of this magnitude could have been committed and concealed without the knowledge of the superiors of the officers currently facing murder charges in court. It's unlikely. And it is therefore very important that we go to the person who holds the highest responsibility, the central command, the commander of the individuals who have been found culpable, so that as soon as they are dealt with, we may say for a fact that those who will come after him will realize that the power they hold is for the trust and benefit of the Kenyan public, and not for the achievement of their own personal goals. Because there's credible merit in the publicly held view that these individuals who are currently facing murder charges, Willie Kimani, his client, and this taxi driver, had been used before by the state for extrajudicial killings. And it was only because of the enormous pressure that we put to bear upon the state that the Director of Criminal Investigation came to court and agreed to facilitate the discovery and investigations that led to what we have now. I believe they knew, and something must be done to make them responsible. Remember the Nuremberg trial? That is where we need to go insofar as matters of this kind are concerned.
Thank you, Mr. President.
This next question we'd like to direct to Victor Kamau from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. And it is a question regarding the fact that the right to a habeas corpus is a right that cannot be limited under Article 25 of the Constitution. What is the consequence to the police when they fail to produce a disappeared person, dead or alive, pursuant to an order of the court? I'm told Victor is not online. That is fine. I'd like to direct the same question to Wamaitha Kimani.
I can hear.
Yeah. Thank you, Juma.
Yes.
Although I hear Victor's voice.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Are you in a position to respond to that question?
Yes, certainly. In the experience, for example, of the Baru case, an order was made that Mr. Serem was in contempt of court because of failing to produce Baru. And for that contempt, he was now deemed to be the person who murdered Baru. So the consequences are unspecific because there's really not been a good test case. I remember that long ago, the court ordered the police to go and actually dig graves to find the person. So when this happens, the consequences clearly are the consequences of a contemnant of court who can be punished. And I think that decision that he should be charged for murder came hot on the heels of that finding of contempt by the court.
Thank you. Wamaida, any additions to that as we close?
Thank you, Juma. I think my addition to that would be the penalty for a contemner, for someone found in contempt of court, is 6 months. And I think that becomes the limitation of the writ of habeas, because we went back to court severally with that contempt of court application that the OCS, who had been ordered to produce, done dead or alive, did not produce. And I think it is the reason why the court in that particular case then chose to truly give a bold ruling and say, no, if you're unable to produce him, then it would mean you know where he is, you know he is dead, and I want the DPP to charge. So I think that also becomes where the penalty is not commensurate with what the family has encountered, and it is necessary to then have in the law a definition of enforced disappearances as a crime, as well as a punishment and some form of redress that is commensurate to that.
Thank you for that, Wamaida. I'd like to direct this very final question to Madam Dorcas Oduor, who is also with us. Welcome, Madam.
Thank you.
So this question comes from George Odhiambo, and he asks, police never identify themselves, especially in the slums, before conducting any search or arrests. How can this be resolved?
Thank you so much, and I want to thank everybody. And I want to say that it is my pleasure to represent the DPP. As the president of the Law Society said, there are some reforms that have to be undertaken within the police and the criminal justice agencies. And I think one of the most important one is that the police on the beat who are doing normal police work should identify themselves. And this is one thing that I'm going to take over to the DPP, and I would ask him to consult with the IG to see that the police who are doing normal routine policing work are in uniform, identifiable, they wear identification tags, and if possible, they travel in police vehicles, which I think is possible. So I think that is one of the areas from this webinar that we can take forward and make sure that it is implemented one way or another. Secondly, we could also have body cameras. And I think one of the things that we didn't talk about is the role of other institutions other than criminal justice agencies. And what I have in mind is that county governments, members of parliament and everybody must ensure that we have cameras on our roads, especially in the slums. I think it is very important to put cameras at strategic places, CCTV cameras, so that at least once in a while we are able to pick up some of these things that we are unable to see with our naked eyes during the day. So that is taken forward, and I think that's one of the recommendations that we're going to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
All right. Thank you very much to our panelists for interacting with our audience and answering all the questions that have been posited to you. I want to now do a 1-minute part. So this is where each and every panelist says a 1-minute parting shot. one thing that we take away from this conversation that we can now action. So I want to start with Mr. Victor Kamau. What is your 1 minute parting shot? What is the takeaway from this conversation? Kamau, please unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes,
we can.
Okay, we need reforms, and we need definitely to make Kenya compliant with the international convention on the protection of all persons from enforced disappearance. And we still want to know where Dan Baru Nyamohanga is. We have not given that up.
To Hussein Khalid, what is your 1 minute parting shot?
I think my parting shot is actually directed to the families of those who have been forcefully disappeared. Individuals like Najim, who began this webinar, the family of Hosni Khalid and Bara, give up hope. You are fighting an evil that is within our communities, and you're not just fighting for your family, but you're fighting for the entire society. There is no justification whatsoever for enforced disappearances, and we must work together. And without the families, then we don't have anything. Continue hoping, and we will stand with you, and we must eradicate this practice in Kenya.
Over to you, Amaida.
Thank you, Julie. I think my parting shot would be twofold. First, that in order for us to move forward, we must look backward. So just as Victor is talking about, he mentions a specific case. Hussein speaks of other cases. There is need to have a resolution to those cases that come up from the past. I know Kenya National have reports, the cry for blood, the era of fighting terror with terror. Other, missing voices have documented cases of people who have disappeared. There needs to be efforts directed towards a closure to those particular processes. That we would not gather, in a year from now, and those families are still either hopeful or frustrated or unable to have a resolution or an answer to what fate has befallen their loved one. And then secondly, the need to criminalize. We must legislate on this issue. We must define it in the law. We must define the means of recourse, and we must also define the punishment for it. And Julie, just to stretch, I think one thought that can't be left unsaid, and I think Wairimo has asked it to the panelists, is the issue of value-based policing. We must realize in each one of these instances where someone is deprived of their liberty, they are within either the confines or the precincts of a police station, an AP camp, or have been moved by agents of state. There were many other officers who had an opportunity to intercept this incident of a disappearance before it escalated into a killing. I think there's need to have a lot of effort towards culture change within the police service, that there would be efforts that promote reporting of incidences of misconduct by officers, by fellow officers, so that we arrest these incidences before they get to the point where it is fatal. So I think that the police reform efforts also need to be very intentional, not just in the accountability mechanisms, but also in the culture change, that we would have more police officers who choose to do the right thing and report these particular incidences.
For that. As we're doing the parting shots, I'd like to inform our participants that we are not really going away. We are setting the space for Juliani to do a closing performance. So please do not log out after the last parting shots. We still have a performance that is going to be done in a few minutes. The next parting shot that you're going to have is from Ms. Lee. Lee, what is your takeaway from this conversation?
I think it's been a really valuable webinar, and I think it also shows what common purpose we all have between the panelists and also the participants in ending and seeking justice for enforced disappearances. My parting shot would be to call on us all together to continue to press for justice, and to continue to press for the effective investigations and accountability for enforced disappearances and for the killings that are linked to them. I think that this requires reforms, but it also requires a strong, cohesive push for these efforts. And I think that this shows, today's webinar shows that we've got a strong coalition to work with. I would also agree with Wamaida on the need to criminalize enforced disappearances. If you don't have a crime to prosecute, then it makes it even harder to do so. And lastly, I think that when looking at the families of the disappeared, it's really important for us to press for the right to truth, and also to continue to press for reparations for enforced disappearances, for extrajudicial killings, and for serious human rights violations in general in Kenya. Thank you.
Much. And to our most final panelists, Ms. Dorcas, you've joined us for this conversation and we are happy to have you. What is your parting shot from this discourse and what can we do going forward?
Thank you again. I think the most important tool that a prosecutor needs to undertake prosecution is the law. I therefore think that it is important that we review the law with regard to forced disappearance to have very clear legislation on this. We need to ratify the international instruments. And above all, I think there is a need, and the DPP had spoken about it before, for all those involved to ventilate and see how we can develop jurisprudence on issues of superior responsibility and command and responsibility. Although prosecution comes at the tail end, it's almost like postmortem. But I think if we apply properly and develop jurisprudence on superior responsibility and command and responsibility, it will be a deterrence. It will deter. And I want to tell you that the DPP or the ODPP does not condone these kind of things. We don't protect those who commit offenses. We have now a fully fledged unit to deal with police excesses. And soon or later, we'll be calling upon all the actors and all the stakeholders to come together so that we see how we can put in place policies and guidelines to deal with this. We want every Kenyan to feel protected and to feel that the institutions that have been put in place under the Constitution actually are responsive to the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. To our President of the Law Society of Kenya, we wish to thank you for being here with the Council. Kindly give us your parting shot for this important discussion, bearing in mind that the Law Society has even given a Purple Ribbon campaign. So this is definitely at the forefront of the heart of the Law Society of Kenya. So what is your parting shot from this important discussion that we have had today?
Is the mouth mine? I didn't hear what...
Mr. President, I'm sorry we didn't get you there. We are now winding down and we are doing a wind down with a 1-minute parting shot from every panelist. And we were thanking you for coming on board with your council. First of all, we wish to thank the council for being here and commemorating this day. And we wanted to know, what is your 1-minute parting shot from this webinar? What can we take away from this discussion?
My takeaway is this. The call we made 4 years ago, I am Willie, must never depart our lips. It must never depart our ears. And this is important for many reasons. One, because in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, the prevalence of forced disappearance targeted politicians. In the recent past, it has targeted many more than politicians. It has targeted professionals. It has targeted witnesses. It has targeted suspects. It is not in the hands of anybody to take anybody's life. However big the grievance, however aggravated the dissatisfaction, the right of life is provided for in the Bill of Rights. It can never be in the hands of the police or the state to determine, unless otherwise decreed by a court of law, that life must come to an end, that one must be forcefully disappeared, and in some certain cases, killed because of what the policeman or anybody acting under the direction of the state perceives to be the shortest way possible of solving a problem. We must always be Willie, because we do not want to have any other Willie. Willie is you and I.
Thank you. That is as strong as it gets, and that is our parting shot from all our panelists. Thank you so much for being here. And now over to you, Agri.
As promised, we have with us Juliani, an artist who has walked this journey with most of us who have been in it. And today he will be performing one of his famous numbers, Machozi ya Jana. And just before he does that, I'd like to ask him a question. Juliani, welcome.
Yani ama ni suti ndio imekuja. Sawa, hakuna na manamba, sawa.
Thank you. You have been part of many difficult conversations. Some of them are corruption, some are human rights. What has been the most impactful moment in this journey for you?
Nini mehappen mnasema nimedu?
Sorry. I would like to say that when we were this round, what happened? I didn't realize that when we were growing up, it was easy because when we were growing up, people used to get killed every week. Young people used to get killed every week. But it was like a rite of passage, you know. You get killed because you're a thug and tunasahau. Ama some people just get killed because they got killed. But this is somebody who was killed kwa kusaidia. So it means even the people who are seeing themselves as people that atasaidia baadaye, they were deterred to even try it because they know the consequences that comes with helping and going out of your way to see justice. So hapo tu ndio ilikuwa monumental kwangu and based on how I look at life and how I look at systems and situations and governance and all this. So, and that's why of course niko kwa hii journey and I'm trying to use my stage and my voice to make sure that easy message imesikika. Sindio. So nashukuru sana kila mtu for being here. Musiende bando zisiishe and okay, in a serious moment. And I really want us to this song, I hope it capture our hearts, it capture our hearts and everything we think about right now. Also, so nashukuru, naomba tuende. Inauma hii side ya left chest, naomba boxes zingine za handkerchief, machozi ligeuza mchanga matope penye rest. DC WhatsApp group unazarudi ukileft, wali wakata mabawa usifly again. Again, clouds ni grey, bone black, macho ni red, colors are beige. Takes a long day, kujua life ni short, life haina remote, unaweza fast forward ama rewind kwa happy episode. Machozi ya jana haigandi, tunapanguza na furaha ya justice. Tuko nawe, tuko awe, la salama. Tuko nawe, tuko awe, tapatana, machozi ya jana. Nilijaribu kujiconvince hauko huku juu ya mapenzi ya Mungu. Ukweli ni roza statue ndani ya watu, sababu seriousness ya poisonous snake, tusipuuze ka cuteness ya pet. Kwa mkono mngekimbilia ndio mliangamia, mkunuia mlo waliwaandalia. Sauti ya glass ya champagne ikigonga cheers, impunity ikicelebrate. Itatizwe na sauti ya nyundo kwa court wakiface judgment. Ile funzo kwa wenye tabia kama hiyo, mwizi wa uhai hukumu usiwe kuchunwa sikio. Tuko nawe, tuko awe,
lala salama, tuko nawe, tuko awe, tapatana, machozi ya jana. Ewe Mungu wajua, njia zangu yatengeze, wale siwezi yasongeze, wewe ndiye nguvu ya wanyonge. Ewe Mungu wajua, njia zangu yatengeze, wale siwezi yasongeze, wewe ndiye nguvu ya wanyonge. Na lile yatima wajane kama Ana, my spouse, tamu time for justice itaranda maji kwa mfereji State House. Blackers, si weka tu ndio waingie behind bars. Enough is enough. Mtuzia nasa isaidi ndani ya house. Usiblame you for destination, kichwa nipatie direction. Tuko nawe, tuko awe, lala salama, tuko nawe, tuko awe, tapatana, machozi ya jana. Tuko nawe, tuko awe, lala salama, tuko nawe, tuko awe.
As I continue on, I just wanted to say this, like in the US, and I remember Abdul hapa juu, Abdul, those hapa via ICJ ameniambia that in the US it's the black and in Kenya it's the poor. So where did you see? So the next song I like to do in Etwa Utawala. And I hope, Yani, all of us take personal responsibility to make sure that a right of each and every, especially the vulnerable and the weak in the community, is imefuatwa. Au sio? Number, the next song.
Sitasimama maovu yakitenda, sitasimama. Ufisadi, ubinafsi, ukabila, kuuza sura, wataki kuuza sera, undugu ni kufaana. Sitasimama maovu yakitenda, sitasimama. Get wadhifa una deserve bila kasha makashfa. Hii society Kenya wanaeza share ni nyungu ya busa ama ketole ya shisha. Mtuko unasikia eko, unajua thamani ya mali na saa za kifuli. Eyo ujaibiwa jua unakaa kitu what, risking jail time, police bullets for. Unaweza argue crime doesn't pay, lakini wezi dismiss justice in a bay. Mwizi yana 40 days, 365 days later anaendelea kugrow faster. Do anything for power, ready to lose their head for presidency. Bora waione kwa currency. Sababu gani siko fake na turbulence, nikifly ndani nimezwa the same feeling. Matatu zikipitia photo msaane, Willie Kimani, yeah yeah. Ikon hata siwezi karanga, uwe hae tagala bagala, niko tayari kulipa gharama. Sitasimama maovu yakitenda, sitasimama maovu yakitenda. Ufisadi, ubinafsi, ukabila, kuuza sura, wataki kuuza sera, undugu ni kufaana. Sitasimama maovu yakitawala, sitasimama maovu. Global response, itabidi raise hands. Growing concern, breakfast a croissant. Mtaki punguze bei ya bidhaa,
tunataka opportunities ndio tu afford hizo bidhaa. Walisema kutembea kwingi ndio kuona mengi, nimeshinda nikitembea maofisi na sijaiona kazi. Sisi za golf kwenye tiger wood, mambo si barabara chini huu, naomba jani masis chakula fike tumboni ikitoka kwa sahani. Policeman anapiga rungu, mwalimu daktari anamrusha tear gas, na mtoto wake ana school fees analipwa peanuts. Nikonja hata siwezi karanga, uwe hae shagala baga, niko tayari kulipa gharama, sitasimama ukitawala, sitasimama ufisadi ubinafsi ukabili, utasura wataki kuunda sera, undugu nikufaa, simama maovu yakitawala, sitasimama maovu. What is together where you need to slap somebody? Complain usisadi, kwani ulidhani 50 bob t-shirts siku ya campaign ilikuwa free? Ni 5 year loan investment, utalipa kingia parliament. We are one, amandi we are one. Utumishi kwa wote, missing CCTV we were watching. Racial security na job opportunity ni kama mti ya kibiriti. Side moja heavy, usiniambie Kenya kuna umaskini, kwani hizi fat fingers zinaibia nane, maskando zina threaten na survival. Uwe hae shagala baga, niko tayari kulipa gharama, sitasimama sitasimama sitasimama. Asanteni, that's my number. How many numbers? Nashukuru.